Well, good morning, everybody. I thought we'd start off with a little bit different spot here by showing you the cumulative downward solar flux anomaly maps for the month of April. So as you look at this, what we're basically trying to measure here is how much of the sun's light is hitting the surface. And where we see the deficits, we're talking about places that have been overly cloudy, and where you see the surpluses, these would be places that have seen a lot more cloud-free days compared to average. And as you kind of look across this map, it really lines up well with kind of our recent precipitation anomalies. But there have been places stretching from this part of the Canadian Prairie through the Northern Plains, all throughout the Great Lakes states and Canadian provinces that have not seen much sun. And then where we've had a lot of very wet weather. I'm talking about this part of Texas getting into the, this section of the Delta. Again, a lot of cloudy days have been what we've seen. Where we're dealing with drought issues, like, for example, those in central and western Kansas. We see the surplus of sunshine, and then you can also pick a few other places down here in the southeast, which lately has gone over a bit drier. And as we work our way up into North Carolina, Virginia, two areas that I've been watching carefully for drought issues as well. So I just thought you might like to see the graphic. It's kind of a fun one to look at. And when we get toward some critical time periods for certain crops like soybeans around the solstice, this map becomes quite important, especially if we start to see influences of wildfire smoke this upcoming summer. So we'll keep an eye on it. It's the beginning of a new month, so let's go back and have a quick look at the April statistics. And we're going to start off with temperatures. So this is where we've landed on our average temperature ranks by climate district when you look back over the last 132 years. So a lot of the Ohio Valley toward the Appalachian Mountains, getting into the Mid-Atlantic, quite warm. Overall, a warmer signal as you get east of the Rocky Mountains. It doesn't mean that every day was warm. The temperatures were quite volatile. I mean, I've said several days in a row now, Montana's temperature pattern, when you look at the month of April and you go, it's warm, I think a lot of people will remember April as being quite active. I think we saw upwards of a 100-degree swing in total temperature in Montana just this month alone. And out west, we've, again, not had a breakaway toward a lot of early season heat, so we're continuing to struggle with the accumulation of early season heat units here. On the precipitation side, this looks quite similar to what I showed you yesterday. The map didn't change too much despite some of the heavy rains that recently rolled through. But again, through the Central Plains to the Corn Belt, there's just this large gradient that you see in through this area where each new system continues to put, a dry line that moves farther and farther, to the east with time. And this continues to kind of rob good moisture from getting into, in this part of Kansas. We've talked about that extensively. You can also see this part of the Mid-Atlantic, southern Florida showing up, and then pockets throughout the west, including a big section here of the Columbia Basin. So as I look at this, excuse me, and try to figure out where May is going to go, and I do have some new May information for you at the end of this video, my questions remain on how active the storm track is going to remain. Because lately, just take a look at what it did yesterday. This is just a quick look at right about sunset, just this long line here where we had numerous storms kind of kick off on this next system that rolled through. And several of these storms were severe, and you can see it. I always love looking at this, just because late in the day you can see how tall these storms are by looking at the shadows that they cast. And what was interesting about this is that we had the boundary roughly in there, but you can tell the wind shear crosses the boundary. And that's a really important parameter to look at when we're trying to assess severe storm type. And long story short, if you can get the wind shear to cross the boundary like I just showed you here, in other words, the upper level winds blow perpendicular to it, you end up getting discrete storms. They tend to rotate. They tend to be good at producing hail and also have, of course, the ability to produce tornadoes and straight line winds. And we certainly had that, and we've had that a lot this spring. So the boundary with respect to the upper level winds is a critical component. So let me give you the alternative to this. Let's imagine the boundary was here, but let's say the upper level flow came like this. Each of these storms rains into one another, and they end up taking on more of a linear shape to them. They tend to train and produce a tremendous amount of flooding. So it's all about actually what we call the wind shear vector to understand the storm type. And there are experts that spend their entire career studying this, and I'm thankful that they do that. Okay, so storms. Let's go take a quick look at the storm reports from yesterday. We had another 13 tornadoes reported, 215 total reports, most of them coming from the large hail. And just using some radar estimated hail size, you take a look at the color bar real quickly over here. As I kind of zoom in and have a closer look, numerous storms hitting the same places they did over the weekend, delivering some very large hail. So this has been kind of a repeat performance in the atmosphere for severe storms in this area. Total precipitation through 6 a.m. this morning, just looking back over the last 24 hours is shown here. So again, can you see the discrete nature of each of these storms because of the way the upper level winds go across the boundary? And as a result, locally very heavy rainfall, but there were numerous places that just saw nothing as the storms went on either side of you. So just important to kind of see that kind of the disparity here overall. Okay, this morning, as we look at the all hazards weather map, we have issues with snow in the Rockies. We have still another freeze warning for this part of the Snake River Valley, freeze warning in Oregon here, frost advisories that kind of line the coast. Another day with red flag warnings coming out of New Mexico into the panhandles in this part of Colorado. Flooding down here and some dense fog here as the cooler air from that high pressure settles a bit farther to the east early this morning. Remember, these colors represent where we have flooding along our river systems. That's what we're seeing here after some of the recent heavy rains. So here's what I'm watching. In the very near term, there are two troughs to pay close attention to. The first one is here. That's the broader trough in the polar jet stream. The second one is there. And this one's pretty potent. And we're going to have to watch how this continues. See how the overall flow is doing something like that? We're going to have to continue to watch this pattern to see how this and subsequent troughs, you can see them still here, are going to get pulled through this flow until it maybe takes a little bit different shape once we get past, this first, 7 to 10 days of this month. This lead trough actually has a second component to it that's coming out, the subtropical jet here, that we're going to watch in Texas later today as well. And that's why the Storm Prediction Center has given us a pretty large area of enhanced risk. So the slight risk goes all the way up to southern Nebraska, down to almost the Rio Grande here, but tucked away in the middle, kind of along that same area you saw yesterday, but just a little bit farther south and west, we're going to keep an eye out on these severe storms. So let's go and have a look at the high-res models to kind of get an idea on the timing starting at 6 a.m. this morning. So first system leaves by 6 o'clock tonight. Models have a bit of a broken setup here initially. So watch for the severe storms here, but we have to keep an eye. There's kind of two components to this. There's one from the subtropical jet. There's one from the polar jet. And you're going to have two systems trying to interact with a similar boundary right in through this area. And so this will be this afternoon and this evening. We're going to keep an eye out for the severe weather risk in that region right in through here. Getting into the overnight hours, we'll have to watch how the deeper trough finally sweeps through and potentially produces some locally heavy rain, again, with more severe storms right back in that same corridor, pushing down to the Red River Valley and eventually into the Mississippi Valley as we get into Thursday. But the severe weather risk starts to diminish by the time we get into Thursday and Friday. And the backside of this system, this is not to ignore what's going on here. Upslope flow coming out of Saskatchewan into Alberta and parts of Montana. And take a look at the wave, this weaker wave that's sneaking in here. We got to watch this one. I called it weaker, but wait until we get past it to see what's following, to see how this next system comes through. So just playing through the rest of the day on Thursday, getting us into early Friday morning. That wave eventually makes it into parts of Wyoming here, delivering some snow. And the low that produces severe weather we're worried about today has now curled itself out. And again, because it's lifting north, these fronts are going to struggle to get all the way into the southeast. So the rainfall comes through this part of the eastern Great Lakes into the Ohio Valley. The front stretches down here into parts of Louisiana, Texas, Arkansas, but it's not going to extend and just dump rain in the eastern part of the country. So what we have to wait on is the next trough. So watch them with me, okay? European ensemble, here's trough one, the one we just talked about. There's two. So as we play this forward, this is now Saturday, first low, curling its way up toward the Hudson Bay. Remember, not digging, large protective ridge here, but the second one digs down here, and this is deep. This gets right into Oregon, California, Nevada as a much deeper low. And by Monday, it's ejecting in the plains. And this has got that look. So the trough dug in and quickly lifts. So this is the type of setup that has no trouble drawing in Gulf moisture. We're going to have the deep cold air on the back side of it setting up the instability. And we've known this area to be capable of producing severe weather this year. This is not a time period where we've shut down the plains for severe weather. And as that trough comes through, it's going to pack a punch right in there. So watch out for that one. This, again, enters the west on Saturday, goes through the Intermountain West on Sunday, emerges Monday night. So it's a Monday-Tuesday setup here. Now, this is the trough that we've been watching for a while. And what I'm telling you about it is that this is the one that the AIFS system had picked up on coming in and setting up over the Great Lakes. We then noticed at the end of last week and the beginning of this week that there's a little bit different timing on it, a little bit different positioning. And now what we're potentially thinking is that going out there to May 10th, 11th, 12th, that stays kind of in this region, keeping things quite unsettled. And it may not be until the 13th, 14th that we start to bring that broader trough into this area. And the artificial intelligence setup here, has that trough rather deep across the east. But it's not, I've been looking carefully every day, despite the depth of this trough, I think we get low temperatures that try to get into the mid to upper 30s, but I don't see a frost event out of this just yet. And as I'll say again, if it changes, I will be sure to let you know. But one thing is for certain, this type of flow in spring on the backside of a trough coming in here is a setup for drier conditions in the midsection of the country. But look where I am. I'm way out here, 11, 12 days from now. Now, someone made a comment to ask about the difference between northwest flow different times a year. In spring, your northwest flow is where you have, again, flow coming out of the Canadian prairie into a trough. In summer, it looks entirely different. In summer, can you just, I'm going to draw on the map, but ignore what's there. In summer, what often happens is we get ridges that somehow sit in places like this. And weak flow comes in off of the Pacific Northwest. And what happens is we get these little disturbances, little shortwaves that sneak around the ridges. They're little just bumps. And anytime you get the air to curl in this direction in the northern hemisphere, you get right on the leading edge where I'm putting these X's, that's where you get some upper level divergence. It's nothing. I mean, it's so subtle, but it's enough to take the cap off the atmosphere, get a storm kicked off. So what do? The storms, if the ridge sets up here or here, I don't care where it is, they all just run the periphery of that ridge. And they're just little weak disturbances that stay on the edge of the ridge. But in summer, we don't get really, really deep cold troughs. So instead of being convergent here, we have we have nothing. Well, we have little weak spots of divergence. So here's the last bit. When you have a trough ridge set up in spring, so here is the ridge and there's the trough. What happens is the flow in the jet stream goes fast around the ridge and it goes a bit slower at the base of the trough, just a bit. So can you imagine the winds are going quite fast here and then they're forced to slow down in this area. If you have upper level winds that are slowing in this area, you get them converging. It's like a traffic jam. The cars coming behind you are fast, the ones ahead of you are going slow. This is all due to how planetary vorticity is set up, okay? But when that occurs, you get convergence. Now this is the top of the atmosphere. So you can't, or let me rephrase that, the top of the troposphere. So this air can't go into the stratosphere. It's statically stable and stratified, so it has to go down. That's what I mean by convergence. And when air sinks, it compresses. You suppress vertical motion. Going up, it sinks down. You get high pressure. On the flip side of it, when you come out of a trough, there's acceleration generally. So on this side of the trough, you have divergence, D. And that allows air to rise easily in that area. That's why we always look on the eastern side of troughs, the right-hand side of troughs for rising motion, and the left-hand side or the western side for convergence. Okay, there's your meteorology lesson for today. What I need to come back to is this guy right here. Watch, ready? See that trough sneaking through? That's the one we're keeping an eye on. This is next Monday night. And so, if the trough is sweeping through like this, you can imagine, let's go look at it. Let's go multi-parameter and we'll do MSLP. We'll do this. See the low? And this is going to draw Gulf moisture. No trouble at all drawing the Gulf moisture. In fact, we'll just look at the artificial intelligence. We'll look at dew point. See this ribbon of warm, moist air? That is just being drawn around this low, which is sitting right, sorry, let's draw that again for you. It's sitting right here, pulling that moisture up into this direction. And that's the destabilization of the air. Here's the dry line on the backside. There's probably going to be a cold front here, a large warm front out ahead of this. And the net effect is we've destabilized the atmosphere, allowing it to just rip off storms. And this is where we get, sorry for that long explanation. Some of you probably fast forwarded. That's okay. This is what we've got for next Monday night. So now we know why we're keeping an eye on that trough sneaking through. So here's the lesson. When we stop seeing those troughs that come out of the Pacific, eject over the mountains, we get a new pattern. And that's what we're waiting on and we're looking for. And usually, the thing that I'm going to look for is some sort of split in the flow over the west. Keep that tucked away in the back of your mind. This morning, I apologize. The reason why I'm recording a bit late is I waited for an extra about hour almost on the European model to finish its run, and it didn't. So the artificial intelligence I don't have this morning, and I apologize for that. They're probably just having some data delivery issues because a lot of us are using it. I'm not sure, though. So this is the national blend of models next 7 days. So you have the current system, you have the trough that's following it, and there's still another one stacked up behind it. I'll show you in a few moments. So a lot of rain coming back into these same areas. All right. We go from there into the WPC forecast. Very similar. You notice how this pattern that we've been in since late April. I mean, these maps, if I would have shown you these maps a week ago and told you it was last week's forecast, it kind of looks the same. As we go forward, this is the new European model forecast. And take a look at this moisture getting this far to the north in the Canadian prairie. I know a lot of folks want to be getting warm and getting stuff done, but there is moisture coming to an area that is still technically under drought. Look at the moisture getting here into the east. We need this badly. It's not a lot, but it's getting that direction. And here's the GFS. And the GFS is, I think, right now the most generous of all the models, delivering some precipitation, especially as you get over here into Virginia, North Carolina over the next 7 days. If we boil this all down to some probabilities, this is what we land on. This is our next week, looking at the chance of getting an inch. Take a look at the Canadian prairie here. Look at the Northwest. And then this whole region, it's been very wet in this area. Very wet down through here. There are a lot of places that are going to see this and say, all right, Eric, I've got my rain. Soil's been recharged. Tile's draining. Shut it off. We got to get a crop planted. When is that going to happen? I'll tell you, for some folks, if I step it up to 2-inch probabilities, this is like a 50 to 90% chance in this area. And take a look at this part of Saskatchewan here, quite wet. The drier side of this, just to be consistent with the way we've been doing this, we've seen these numbers fall off, which is good. Most of the eastern Great Lakes into New England still has a drier signal. And again, we're always watching to see how far back to the west moisture can be pulled into this area and along the entirety of the western plains. So now let's get to the models quickly and get an idea on the timing. So starting off early this morning, playing through Thursday. So again, we're going to watch the risk of those severe storms tonight here. This is where the front is by Thursday afternoon and evening. It presses farther to the east, and that's low number 1 out. The weak little disturbance behind it, this is the one that brought in the snow to Wyoming, is now here by the time we get to Friday afternoon. And once we play into Saturday, there's our next deep trough coming through. So you know that you're going to watch this one all weekend enter the northwest. And as it comes into the northwest, look at the potential for some snow here. Both models picking up on that. At elevation, but snow. We have, meanwhile, a lingering front sitting in this area. That is in both models, actually a pair of them, delivering some precipitation to this region. And getting into Sunday and Monday, now we watch the recovery. The new low comes out. It's a snowmaker in the Rocky Mountains. As it pops out here, this is now 7 a.m. Monday. Getting into Monday evening, this will be the corridor over which we watch the severe storms kind of erupt. That's what they're going to look like right in through there. So keep a close eye on this spot, and don't be surprised if this extends all the way down into this part of Texas. So that's out there on Tuesday now. That low curls its way out, and it finally tries to push some moisture farther to the east. But here we are at a 210-hour forecast, and finally the models are aligning on the position of a low. I like the consistency here overall. Now, I mentioned a moment ago there needs to be something that changes as we get out into week 2. And this is part of that. This is May 11th. Subtropical jet comes in. There's still flow coming across the country like this, meaning we're going to watch out for the risk of wetter conditions here. But the polar jet seems to start to take a little bit different trajectory. So from the 11th to the 12th, 13th, 14th, that's when this cooler air settles in here. Take a look. See that? There's a bit of a split west. So this doesn't necessarily slow things down here, but it starts to change things up for the west. So instead of having a steady train of systems coming in like this, we're getting a little bit different look out here. Could it be to the MJO movement? Could it be to just due to El Nino gone, La Nina conditions in, many other subseasonal factors, all of the above? And to diagnose it's going to be hard, but this is where the models have landed. So what this means is we still have the risk from the 8th to the 14th for wet conditions in through here. Really, it's the 8th through the 12th. It's beyond that, when that trough sets up here. Remember about the 12th, 13th, that the drier conditions come in. But this is for a lot of folks in this area looking at this map are going to say, I am not going to get to plant for 2 more weeks. And there is the chance that that drier signal lasts for that long. Or, forgive me, that wetter signal lasts for that long. Drier doesn't come in after it. So what does that week 2 look like? Well, remember, the week 2 is mostly dominated by the pattern that will eventually change, I think, after the 13th. And that's why when we get the new European model, well, there's still a lot of this coming in. But this drier trend in the west is the signal that we're starting to see a bit of a split happening in the western United States. Okay? All right, let's get on to temperatures now. Frost risk over the next 7 days, just kind of keeping an update on this. A lot of cold air tucked away in the western United States continues. This is why we had the frost risk this morning in these areas. High temperatures today, playing out toward Thursday. Really cool across the northern tier of the U.S., but hot in this area. Going forward into Friday and Saturday. Now remember, here's that deep trough coming in on Saturday in the west. It sits over the Great Basin on Sunday. Warm sector opens on Monday. This is the severe weather risk. And on Tuesday, we're going to watch this system move its way toward the northern plains and the upper Midwest. This is the total accumulated GDDs forecast starting today through the next 7 days. And one of the concerns we have is that in this pattern, we're looking at a lot of heat down here across the south. And the risk of hazardous temperatures was just updated from May 8th to May 10th. It's a couple of days down here where we're going to be watching for the risk of pretty hot temperatures, talking about getting well into the 90s and possibly mid-90s over that time frame. But as I look at it, that's the day 5 through 10, which will capture that risk of high heat down here. But again, you can tell what this pattern is going to do. You keep cold here, you're going to get this for a little while longer. But take a look at this. That May 12th time period, this is early in the morning. There's that cooler air. Do you see where it is on my color bar, though? We're right over in this region. And then if I go one more day forward, let's get out there, 7 a.m. on Monday the 13th. I don't see a frost, but I see cooler air coming in during that time. So I just want to let you know when that trough sets up here, May 11, 12, 13, I don't think there's the risk of a major frost. But it does show you, when you look out there day 10 through 15, the chance for the split. See how there's warmth coming in the west? We're going to get this. So for a while longer you have this, but this will start to change things up for the midsection of the country. The GFS has been showing this for a while. This is what the European's up to. Day 5 through 10, so still in our same pattern. Day 10 through 15, see the warmth coming into the west? The shifting happening here? I think that's going to be critical to understand if this mid-month time period is going to be opening up some planting windows for a lot of us. All right, let's get on and finish this one up. This was just released yesterday by the the CPC, the Climate Prediction Center. That map, pause the video if you want to take a closer look at it, or go to cpc.ncep.noaa.gov to get a good look at this. This is their new drought outlook, valid for May. So look at the color bar. They're talking about improvements here, degradation, drought development likely in this shade. This is their new seasonal outlook, though, and I've been hovering back and forth just to see where they're projecting increases in drought between now and the midsummer time period. And what we notice is that they're following closely with their seasonal forecast, which I showed you last week, and 2 weeks ago actually. And that is to bridge this area with dry conditions starting in the plains and mountains first. All right. The next thing they've released is this, their new 1 month outlook. And I think May is going to be a bit of a head scratcher for a lot of us. And I don't think the beginning of May is going to look anything like the middle of May. And as a result, I think this is not going to be one of those Mays where one map will capture the entire thing. But we look at them anyway, right? So this is the CPC's new outlook. And I'd like to show you what, sorry about that. I want to show you what the current May outlook is from the European model. Now remember, starting now, it's got this big system and the one that follows it hitting this area. So if we stretch this out to get away from that, this would be like time period of May 7 to June 7. And it's keeping the eastern Great Lakes, much of the Great Lakes and states, wet into the northeast. Got a bit of a drier signal in the southeast, drier in the plains. And this is where I think we get into that pattern shift around mid-May. So that's what I think the models are picking up on here. I want to give you just two last things here as we wrap this one up. The first is an update from one of our seasonal models. This was its update today, and it's showing the risk of developing La Nina by summer. This is the CFSV2. The commentary on this is that earlier in April, the CFSV2 was dropping the average ocean temperatures way down here, and it has since, look at the dashed line right in through there, it's moderated. And as a result, the CFSV2's newest forecast, and this is a kind of a 6-panel look at this, right? So May, June, July, August, July, August, September. I'm going to scroll up so you can see them all. There you go. Take note of the differences on the timing of the spread of drought it now has coming out of the west. So this is the June, July, August time frame. And notice it's got a lot of stormy conditions in through here. June, July, August. This kind of follows that hot, dry summer. I need a little more rest, I guess. The hot, wet summer, hot, stormy summer ideas we've had in this region. By late summer and early autumn, it's got quite a bit of dry conditions spreading throughout much of the United States. And by September, October, November, that's what it looks like. But you have to call this into question because we still are looking at the potential for an active hurricane season, right? So along the Gulf Coast, it's going to be hard to make a call on what the fall is going to look like. But that just want to give you an update on this. Finally, a bit of a global update, and we'll focus on South America to wrap it up. Just a quick 10-day update. A lot of stormy conditions throughout Europe, as you can see. Potential for bringing in more rain into Turkey. But notice this part of the Russian wheat belt continues to stay drier. Very wet throughout Indonesia. Southeast Asia is finally starting to see some precip increase in places. Still flooding south of the Yangtze River. New South Wales, parts of Queensland looking wet too. But take a look at South America and watch as I kind of animate total precipitation in this region. It's the same story we've had now for a while. Flooding south, Rio Grande do Sul, parts of Santa Catarina, Paraguay, Uruguay, Argentina, and just a hole here where the monsoon is done. So we'll watch that carefully, and I'll talk about it again tomorrow. Have a good one. Thanks.